Hi everybody, and welcome back to Hook and Needle History. My name is Rachel. I'm your historian host.
And I'm also your historian host, Teddy.
And every other week we bring you a series based on our interests in history and knitting, in crochet, the history of knitting and crochet, pop culture, and everything in between.
Yep.
And we're back. Episode 2.
We're back. I know. Thank you for everyone supporting us and whatnot.
Yeah, I think the feedback from our first episode was really, really positive.
Yeah, surprised.
People were really, really excited for us, which is really cool, and it makes us more excited to keep doing this, and gave us a lot of energy to really do some fun stuff.
Yeah, we got more fairy lights up in the store.
Yes, lots of fairy lights.
Lots of fairy lights. They're awesome. Anyway, we have a bit of an array of tea today, so...
Yes, first things first.
Yes, first things first, Rach.
It's our tea.
Bottoms up. So we have a winter chai today from Big Heart Tea Co., which we carry in store. Very light, it's not super black tea-esque, which I like. Although I'm a caffeine person, sometimes I don't want a super strong black tea. So this is a very good option. Yeah,
really good. Yeah. And I definitely don't go for the strong black tea stuff, so this is very good.
I do like it.
Yeah.
So, I think we wanted to start off this episode sort of backtracking on some of the questions we got in our Instagram stories, asking a little bit about us and what we like, things like that. And we missed some questions because we had already uploaded our video. So, favorite decade of fashion history?
That's a huge question.
Yes.
Like that's tough. And I really didn't think about this before sitting down filming this, so this is kind of just on the fly for me. But when I think of fashion history, I really think of just like the 20th century kind of, but like kind of how I would dress today if I could pick any decade. I kind of think in that sense, but so like growing up, I loved the 1920s style. I feel like I have a good body shape for the 1920s, very like drape style, for women, drop waisted stuff. I feel
a lot of what you would see in the advertisements, like a Lady Mary type.
Yeah. Yes. Well, the whole Downton Abbey thing. I feel like how they dressed was just so cool. And so I love the 1920s. But then on the other end, I really love like 60s and 70s kind of hippie style as well. I don't know. I kind of go for just about anything. But if I was gonna go back in time, like a little bit more, like way back when, I don't know. You know which one I don't like? I'll tell you which fashion era I really don't like. Is the Empire waist, like Jane Austen, Regency era.
Yes, Regency.
I don't really like those style dresses. They look good on some people, but
not for everyone.
Not for everybody. Personally, I don't really like that style. I like the 18th century. I like corseted, dresses. I think just look really, really pretty.
The ornate sort of look to them.
Yeah,
for sure.
So that's kind of a little bit of how I view that question. What's your favorite decade?
It's funny because everything is so in almost like a recent history kind of mode of thinking when you think fashion history. I think for me it has to be Edwardian, so tail end of the 1800s to like 1910s. So the beginning of Downton Abbey, essentially. I love the look.
The dowager dress is more Edwardian than
violet. Yes, absolutely. Love the look of obviously a high neck blouse with a lot of the ornate details of lace. Anything with a cameo too. I just like that look. It's very romantic looking. I was going to also make the joke. Today I feel a little bit 70s, but like today in our actual content we're going back to like the 1870s. So it's kind of funny.
We should try and dress like a period that we're talking about. That could be something.
See if
anybody wants to see us try and dress like that.
Let us know in the comments what decade you'd like us to dress up as.
How fun. That would be a lot of fun. I would love to do that. We will. No, I love your vest. I think you wore that when we went out to dinner that one time with Krista.
Yes, this is Feel and Blue. She has a wonderful shop
Oh yes, great shop.
Local maker, and she does awesome pop-ups. I think we will have one in the near future, probably in the spring again.
Yeah,
That's what.
bring her back.
Yeah, vintage little number here with some velvet and denim. Yeah. Love it. Yeah. So, nice. Yeah. So yes, we're in the shop today. We also announced on Instagram that we have a fun giveaway going on, and it's going to be going on until the 21st of December. We will be announcing the winner in our next Christmas/holiday episode. Yes. But winner receives an Addy kit of needles.
Yay!
And it's a $200 value.
Yeah, that's like that's a really nice kit, and it's great for people who want to like really invest in knitting. Like if you don't have any kits or anything or sets of knitting needles, like this is a great opportunity to like get a full kit, because you can, there's so many sizes there that you can really work with almost any pattern that you need to.
So these are interchangeable as well. And we have that Instagram giveaway going on. I think I have the rules in there. Follow us, like the post, tag some friends, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and for an extra entry you can share on your story as well. Yes. So little fun.
Very excited. Greetings. I know, I'm so excited for that and to announce that and get that out. So it'll be super fun.
Yeah. All right. So what do we got going on whip wise?
Oh, so many whips. Yeah. So for my project, so I figured I would start with the shawl that I talked about in our first episode. Which if you haven't watched our first episode, I'd say go back and watch that. It's our little introduction to us and everything. But I brought back my shawl. I really wish that I had finished it before this episode because it's all about shawls, but that's okay.
That's all right.
Last time I was still on the purple, so this is the Ozetta Winter Tales shawl again, but I added a little bit of the Victorian rose color, so this is new as of last episode, and it's so vibrant. The colors are, you know, green and purple, and it's nicely variegated, and it's just really, really cool. So yeah, the rest of the shawl is going to be this color, and I'd like to say I'm almost done, which is fun. Again, I've got my hole in the shawl, but we're gonna ignore that.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, so this is the one work in progress that I am thinking of trying to finish before the end of the year. Between all of the Christmas making, you know, things that I have going on, I'm gonna try and finish this out, because I'm almost there. And it has been quick to work up because the stitches are it's simple. It's just
that green is just so vibrant.
The green is really great. I think it's cool. I gravitate towards the greens, as we know, so I think it'll be really fun. And I think the color blocking is cool, you know, a lot of purple and then the green. So, yeah. I'm slowly but surely trying to finish this one, so.
It's a long-term
project, but not too much longer. I feel like I could get it done.
Yeah. I mean, you know, don't put the pressure on yourself for, like, the end of the year, but, you know, we still got a ways to go.
Yes. I want to be able to wear it soon, so that's my motivation.
I know. Yeah. I have all these Sophie scarves that I've accumulated yarn for, so now I'm like, well, it's a perfect accessory for literally all year round.
Yeah.
I think, anyway.
Yeah. And we were just talking about me possibly doing the Sophie scarf.
Everyone needs one.
So I'm picking out some colors now. I really feel like that would be a fun, it's just a nice little accessory.
Wonderful gift.
Yeah.
Speaking of, we also have those kits in store. We have our Holiday Harvest limited edition Grace and Pearl colorway from Chelsea Yarns. Christina was gracious enough to have a separate exclusive colorway for us, so we have that in store as well in case you want to use that color for Sophie. So
we put together some really, really fun, you know, colors together for the kits there, so definitely pick one up because the colors are really, really fun together.
Fun to work with the mohair, and even the Solaris from Kremke Yarn, you can add that in. Speaking of, I will show off my Wave of Change.
Yes, this is the other one we talked about in our first episode that we were both going to start and try and do. And we both have, I'll bring out mine too.
Yes, bring them
out.
We
both have just about the same. I think I worked a little bit more, colors. But yeah, colors are so fun. And this is my first time working with mohair, so it's been interesting.
Yes.
So yeah,
it just makes such a difference.
It does
in the texture.
It does. So yeah, what are your colors again?
All right. So I'm holding a duet from Chelsea Yarns with a zebra. So it is a cobblestone and mohair and a fingering held together with a stellaris, which is just that bit of shine there. So I'm holding 4 strands, which make a bulky. And so the duet fireside is a bit of a sort of smoky purple gray, and I'm really drawn towards those very moody colors. Yeah. It's a very romantic color, I think. And I decided to pair that with a rose gold zebra, which is slightly dusty, and it does have some speckling of browns and oranges in there too, which is really fun. Held with a sort of silvery stellaris. I normally go towards golds always, but I think this is fun and different for me, so I'm really excited to finish it out.
I think the colors will look really, really great on you. Yeah. Thank you. It goes well with your hair color. Yeah. A little chestnutty action going on. Yeah. Love it. My colors are also the Chelsea duet, so the cobblestone and the mohair, and I did a fingering weight. And the fingering weight is in Copper Canyon, and the color in the duet is Eucalyptus Energy. And putting the colors together was really fun, so I wasn't quite sure how they were going to look. It's my first time using Chelsea yarn, so I was super excited to use it. Rhonda, Teddy's mother and the owner of Grace and Pearl, mentioned to me that the colors looked like the Statue of Liberty. Yes. The patina, turning copper into like this greenish, light green patina. So I did not have that in mind when I was making it, but it looks like that, and it's kind of cool. I think that's a really fun way of looking at it. So yeah, it's like this like green, and then the browns and coppers are in there. And it's super fun. I'm having so much fun making this that I was telling Teddy I was neglecting some other more important Christmas projects I should have been doing this weekend. I worked a lot on this, which was just a lot of fun.
And it's very funny too, because orange and blue are contrasting colors, complementary. Yes. So, you get that nice pop of color in there with everything going on. I think it's just beautiful.
It's so fun.
And it's still neutral. Like, you can wear that with literally anything, even the skirt you have on. Mm-hmm. How cute.
Yeah, I would definitely wear it with this. I love the, in the actual pattern, the Wave of Change pattern, you got the stripe, the pearl rose stripes there. Gorgeous. Which I think is such a fun little texture thing that someone who's so new at knitting like me can just switch off and do a pearl rose. Makes it very easy to add some really cool texture into a sweater. So the pattern's been great. Had a little bit of trouble in the beginning with the sizing of the needles and the cords, but once I got past that, it was smooth sailing.
Right. Yeah, I'm excited to also practice doing short rows because I'm new to that.
Yes.
As well as...
How many times did you watch a video to get through that?
So, I actually joined in on our class that we're having in store, just to the short rows part, because obviously, like, I'm at work, so I took the time to just sit in on the short rows, and now I feel good enough to, get on with doing the arms and the sleeves and whatnot. But I'm excited to keep honing that craft.
Yes. This is the first time I've done German short rows as well, and I watched the video that was linked in the pattern. She had a video there where you can follow along with how to do the short rows, and I was very confused at first. What actually stumped me, I was super confused at first, was the markers. So there's 4 markers to indicate the front and the back, and then the armholes. So I was counting the first marker that we put in as marker 1, but that was the beginning of the round marker. And so I was going into the shoulder with the short rows. I'm like, wait a minute.
You would have had an arm coming out.
It was weird. I'm like, this can't be right. So then I checked back and I saw that the stitch marker was called something different. So I'm like, oh, okay. So this is, so I just switched around the stitch marker placement of the short rows, and then it all made sense.
Yes.
And then I watched the video back and forth a couple of times and got through it. But I actually came across the pattern. I forget what it's called, but it's a little baby hat that's like a little pointed top, cute. And there's like an ear cover that are German short rows. So talking about wanting to like practice more of those, I think that's a great pattern to try, because you've got the 2 little ear, like it comes down to cover the ears,
like an ear flap,
on a little hat, and it's adorable. We can probably
link
share.
I'll
link that pattern because I might want to do it. and I think it would be good practice for the short rows. Yeah.
Apparently a lot of the balaclava patterns have the short rows as well for the back of the head shaping. Yes, so challenge accepted.
Yes, we will become masters of the short rows.
Don't you worry. Also, I have a Black Pearl Magic bag here that I inevitably stole from my mother, Rhonda. She grabbed it at Rhinebeck, so never enough project bags, I feel like. And this is a good one for the Wave of Change. Since I'm holding 4 strands, I can just keep the yarn in the bottom of the bag and it sits by itself, and it's just lovely. So
Speaking of project bags, I have one that you and your mom got me, which I'm putting my shawl in right now because it's getting a little bit bigger. But you guys also got this at Rhinebeck, right?
Yes, it's a tiny Casey.
Yes.
Gorgeous.
It's great. It's such a great size, and it's got some pockets inside and the zipper to hold everything nice and tidy. So great, great project bag. Thanks.
Good colorways.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So those were our projects.
Yeah, and today is technically a Wednesday, Whip Wednesday, but you guys will be seeing it Friday at noon.
Yes.
So thank you. Anyway, on to the content that you've all been waiting for. So, why do you think today, episode 2, was a great day to talk about shawls?
I don't know, to be honest. I think that shawls are a great staple to have, and from what I was doing some research on is that they fell out of fashion like really quickly. And you don't really see them too often in like nowadays, but so I feel like with so many awesome patterns out there to kind of bring back the shawl, and like I can't wait to finish this shawl and do possibly more and like wear them out, like going out shopping, like have a shawl around me, like it's very cool, and it does make me think of very like old-timey kind of dress, which is cool. It's fun. So I feel like, to bring back something that has been around for so long and kind of bring it back into style, which so many people have been doing, designing awesome patterns and things. And it's just a great staple. You can wear them with anything. Yeah. Why do you think we picked shawls?
I think because they're so timeless. Yeah. And when you think knitting, you think shawls. But I also think that because everyone has been contributing to the knitting community in a very modern sense. So now we have so many different, like the winter tails that you are knitting. There's so many different ways to look at a shawl. Even wrapping it around you front-wise, makes it a little bit more like a scarf. Yeah. So I think it's sort of a fun way to look at fashion and history and see, where did this traditional idea of the shawl come from? Yeah.
It's very, very interesting. Yeah.
So I know also we wanted to talk a little bit about our master's theses topips.
Oh yeah.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, do that first. Yeah. It has nothing to do with shawls, but yeah. So I was thinking of mentioning my undergrad a little bit and then my master's. Yeah. So my undergraduate degree, my thesis was kind of the evolution and history of ballet, which I had a lot of fun doing because I have a background in ballet. I started dancing when I was 5 and went all through up until college, and I still take classes, and now I teach ballet at my old dance studio, which is super great. So when I was in college, I had been, out of the whole like ballet dance world for a couple of years because I didn't dance in college. So I kind of wanted to take the opportunity to like do some research on the history of it, and so I basically just researched the history of ballet, talked about it. I don't remember the exact like thesis question I posed, but I basically started with like ancient dance, like tribal dance, things like that, and then I kind of jumped to the medieval courts of Catherine de Medici, which people I think tend to skip over her influence on the ballet world, but then it transferred over into France, and obviously King Louis and everything that happened there. So and then I picked up from there and went into the modern age of ballet and just kind of how it shifted and developed, which is a lot of fun. My master's degree thesis, though, I have a little bit of, I don't want to say regret, but what I did with my master's dissertation was I picked Eusebius of Caesarea. He was actually not a medieval. This wasn't a medieval paper. It was a late antiquity into early medieval period. So I was very, very interested in like the early years of church history. So Eusebius, he's basically known as being the father of church history. He's like one of, if not the first person to start writing a history of the church, of the Catholic Church. So, and he lived during the time of Constantine, which is when he made Catholic Church the, religion of the empire. So this was around like 4th century, early 4th century. So just like right before the Middle Ages. And I can't really remember why I picked this time period instead of being like truly medieval. I just was super interested in that. And so I did my paper on basically how his history like affected the rise of Christianity in the Roman Empire during the time of Constantine. Very fascinating, very interesting, but I wish, because I did my master's in Scotland, I wish I had went with one of my first plans, which it was kind of shot down, which is why I didn't do it, by my one of my advisors. I wanted to write a paper on Queen Margaret of Scotland, who is the only sainted monarch in Scotland, and she was the wife of King Malcolm III, and who, if you're familiar with Macbeth, he was in that whole story of Macbeth. So I wanted to do a paper on her and kind of her influence in Scotland at the time. I love her as a historic figure, and I really, really wanted to do more research on her life and her kind of her influence on Scotland at the time, kind of bringing maybe more of her sophisticated nature to a more barbaric country like Scotland. But I was told that there really wasn't enough to write about, which, because I don't know if you found this with your papers and your dissertations and things, but like you want to find something that's very precise, and you want to have something small enough where you can have this precise thing, but you don't want it to be too small where you have no sources and you can't do anything about it. But you don't want it to be too big where you're like, well, I'm just gonna write like a summary or an overview. So you have to find that balance. So I was told I couldn't really do that with Margaret, but since then I've been wanting to kind of do my own independent research and just do that. So
it'll be an episode.
It could be an episode. Yeah, I mean,
like a work in progress.
Yeah. Because I was in Scotland. I was studying medieval history. Why I didn't do my dissertation on something about Scottish medieval history, I look back on it, I'm like, why didn't I do that? But I don't say that I kind of regret what I did make, but there's a part of me that's like, I just should have done something else. But so yeah, that's kind of my little journey with my dissertation. Yeah. I don't think it was all that great, but it was enough to get my
we
degree,
did it. So. We did it during the at the beginning of COVID. So hats off to us.
Yeah, I finished out my dissertation in my bedroom in Spring Lake, New Jersey, instead of Glasgow, Scotland. So that was a real bummer, but I got through it, and I wrote like 40-something pages. It was a big old thing. Yep. So that was a lot, and I got through it, and it was a great time. So that's my dissertation story.
Yep. I think I'm very grateful also because I wanted to present in front of my friends and family live, obviously in person, my thesis, but I was very happy with the end result because in the end I was able to do it with being live on Facebook, where cool. My friends and family all over the world in Greece could also watch me.
That's cool.
So that was like a blessing as well. What a crazy time. Yeah. Anyway, so my undergrad senior paper was about the backlash that had occurred in Greece after World War II. So the World War II in Greece is a very interesting topic. There was a vacuum of power after the war had ended, and there were various warring sort of groups that wanted power. So there were members of the resistance who wanted to form a democracy, who the other group wanted to form a more communist regime. So actually the members of the resistance, and I was mostly talking about women in my paper, female women resistance members who were affiliated with the Communist Party were actually put in different camps throughout Greece. And there were actually some in Chios from the island my family's from. So it's very interesting to look back and see, you know, what was going on politically in the various countries. But Greece is very interesting during this time period too, because I think also, I was just talking about this with my cousin, I think a lot of people think of Greece as just ancient Greece, ancient Greek history as like the pinnacle of this country's history. When people go there, you know, they go to Santorini or Mykonos, but there's such a rich sort of folkloric history as well that's very connected to the earth. That's, you know, an agricultural place and space. So I think we can talk about that a little bit too, as we talk a little bit about, you know, fashion history and our textiles.
I have two questions for you. Didn't one of your family members, was he part of the resistance? My great uncle was a resistance member on the island of Chios, and he's actually mentioned in some scholarly works.
That's
which
so
is
cool.
Beyond
cool. My yaya and her mother also were involved with the resistance, and they were awarded certificates by the Allies.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, my other question might be stupid, but you're talking about agriculture of Greece and being connected with that. In Greek mythology, do you pronounce the goddess of agriculture Demeter or Demeter? As a Greek person, how would you pronounce that?
Demeter's fine.
Demeter.
And you know what's crazy too? So I'm taking Greek lessons at our church. I was not fortunate enough, and I kick myself still. I didn't go to Greek school as a child, so I'm sort of catching up on things now. But you know, I have a good familiarity. It's wild how much ancient Greek language has evolved into what we see as modern Greek. So it's a totally different thing. It's wild.
Because I took ancient Greek and as an undergrad. I minored in it because I took so many classes. I don't remember about any of it, which is so sad. I really, really wish I could probably like kind of refresh myself on that, but such a cool language. And the first time one of my professors said Demeter, I'm like, I thought it was Demeter. Anyway, random question.
Fun fact, the word heather is an ancient Greek word for water. And so, yes, that's a very interesting spelling as well. Totally different than what you see as modern Greek today. So,
so interesting.
Yes.
So what did you do for master's?
Yes, thank you. So master's, I focused a lot on early modern Mediterranean dealings. A lot with the Ottoman Empire, a lot with actually the Tudors in the Mediterranean.
Ooh, cool.
Yes.
Very cool.
And a lot of environmental history. And I really enjoyed that part of my experience in the master's field. So my master's thesis was about the journey of the mineral alum, which is a mordant. And for those of you watching who are dyers of textiles, you'll know a mordant is basically a chemical or a compound that helps adhere color to cloth. Cool. So alum is used in the process to adhere those very rich, vibrant Byzantine purples, for example, indigos from the east, etc., to actual cloth. And that was a very highly regarded trade mineral element in Europe, obviously, once trade was established in the Tudor period, etc. So
very cool.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about what we did. We spent a lot of time and effort on.
A lot of hours.
Yeah, that's cool.
So also I wanted to mention a couple of the sources we used for today, which I thought were really great sources. And in case any of you want to check them out, first and foremost, we listened to a great podcast on Cashmere, the actual place, and how that sort of translated into Cashmere with a C in Europe. And that was a podcast episode by two wonderful ladies. You can see them streaming on Spotify. The podcast name is Dressed, and it's all about a fashion history. So I thought that was really fascinating. We also had a wonderful article by Giulia, Calvi, Imperial Fashions, and I think that really helped us get sort of an informed look at the trade in Europe during the 18th and 19th centuries. So
cool. I actually looked into doing a quick Google search as the legitimate historians that we are. I did a quick Google search, and I actually did find a couple of websites from like people who like yarn bloggers and things like that, of like little tidbits of certain history, like parts of the histories about, you know, the yarn and things like that. So I can put the websites that I found there.
We'll link them up.
Yeah, some little things there. So yeah, so how do we want to start getting right into the content of the shawls?
Oh, well, I think the beginning is almost like a geographical lesson.
Yeah.
Because obviously there's a place, Cashmere, with a K, and Cashmere we think of with a C is a material.
You know what I think of when I hear Cashmere? Is the Led Zeppelin song.
Oh, yes.
Right?
That too.
That is a Led Zeppelin.
That's with a K.
That's Cashmere. That's like one of the first Led Zeppelin songs that like I remember like listening to. Great song, I love it. So then I found out, oh, Cashmere's a place.
Yep.
So that's a really good point, because I think geography is so important with history, and me, I was always not a great person when it came to geography. I was so just uninterested in geography, and then I realized just how important it is to history. You have to know where in the world these things are taking place, and of course personally traveling like helped a lot, you know, with my geography, especially in Europe, you know.
Sure.
So yeah, Kashmir, is that India?
Northern India.
Mm-hmm. I think isn't some of like it's like contested between, I think, a few countries, right?
That could be definitely a historical lesson for another day.
I can't go into that.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So yeah, Kashmir is kind of where we kind of started with that, and then talking about, I think the trade is super important with, you know, how did it spread to Europe and then ultimately to America and the rest of the world.
Yes. You know, British Empire.
Yes.
I feel like this was the pinnacle when you're talking about the 18th and early 19th century. That's the pinnacle of the British Empire.
Yeah, their navy and everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting too, because when I was doing environmental history at Monmouth, I also looked into a little bit of material history too, and we can understand so much from an object. There is so much there to inform us about economic, political, environmental, social, religious context of the time. So, you know, looking at a shawl, that has a history. And I was, while I was getting ready, you know, before work, I was thinking about filming the podcast today, and I was like, even a shawl has history. And it's exciting, obviously, for us. I don't know about you guys at home, but, you know, that's a perfect way to explain to someone who doesn't necessarily love history or thinks of history as something boring. Yeah, that is like reading a book or a journal article or whatever. It's like you don't have to do that. You can just look at objects and learn a lot from them. Just from them. On that note, I did look up. I think it was the Metropolitan Museum of Art. They had on their website like a little blurb about I believe a 19th century shawl. And it was in the Paisley, the Paisley pattern, which is something that we were on the same wavelength.
I know, it's very funny, and I think it's important to say that we both read the same article, but after that, we haven't really talked about anything prior to this.
This is uncut.
So, and everything that we like are going to bring up and talk about, like, I'm curious to see what kind of other things you did and what I did, and see how like it kind of matches. But of course, got to talk about the Paisley design and motif.
Go for it, girl.
Yeah, so I came across, it was a picture of one of the 19th century shawls that's held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and I was looking at the Paisley pattern, and you think of Paisley, Scotland, because they just they basically stole the pattern, and the pattern was originally a Persian, you know, pattern, and it apparently was modeled after what the Tree of Life, you know, is meant to look like. So the Paisley pattern is not actually Scottish, for people if they don't know. It was a very interesting time, because when the trade routes were happening and the ships were coming into London, there were people in Paisley, Scotland, who would send their people down to London and try and like get the first look of these new and exotic shawls and things like that, and they would then replicate them up in Paisley. Paisley was one of the first areas where they would manufacture them like in factories, like in bulk, and so they weren't the original, you know, thing, but they were taking them and replicating them up in Paisley. So so it was cool to see the pattern there on one of the shawls, and the Paisley pattern itself is very interesting and has a little history there. So
and it's basically, if you don't know what Paisley is, I'm sure all of you watching do. It's sort of that teardrop-esque kind of shape. And originally it's called a Buddha.
Yeah.
Like B-U-T-A.
Yeah.
So that was translated and stolen to be named after the town, the city of Paisley.
Which I drove through. Paisley is very close to Glasgow, actually. Just a little tidbit.
Very fun.
Yeah.
And kind of concerning also.
Yeah, it makes you think, like, okay, when trade routes happened, like, everything was shared, that was the whole point. It's like bringing something from another country to somewhere else, and you adopt these things and you embrace them, and if you're gonna claim it as your own, that's an issue. But but you can't help but see the inspirations from other places, and it was a big deal to see these shawls.
Oh, sure. And all that intricate detailing too, and it's sort of fascinating. I mentioned a lot of this in my thesis and was becoming very familiar with this idea that everything is sort of in these industries is very interconnected. So you have the merchants, you have the makers, you have the agriculturalists, you have even the journalists and the writers, and the locals and the retailers who are all in this huge system, surrounded by these shawls, published in magazines for women of the 18th and early 19th century. It's just amazing that all these people are part of this larger system just for this one object. Yeah. So that's sort of like that object history where it's almost imperial history versus imperial history meets labor history, for example. So.
Well, because it kind of coincides with like the Industrial Revolution and manufacturers
moving
and all
parts,
that.
literally.
Because you go from it being a very, very old and old tradition in the East, and how it's so intricately handmade. I was reading that in Kashmir, the girls would, at like the age of 10, they would be trained to start making these shawls, and so you have the intricacies of how it's made, and then how it kind of transitions to this big old, industry of shawls, because people just were in such high demand. Why do you think they were in such high demand at the time?
Goodness. Well, I would blame it on Napoleon.
Yeah, Napoleon. Yeah.
Let's go with that.
Yeah.
So he obviously, was a giant imperial figure of the early 19th century, started his reign in 1804, and Empress Josephine, I think, was also a style icon. Yeah. So a shawl meant something. It's a regality, it's luxury, pure luxury. Yeah. Something that is going to take years to make, is going to be wanted and desired by the upper classes as well as the lower classes. So it's sort of that interesting dance. Well, like Paisley, you have this idea where they can also make it economical in a way where you can use local materials for people who aren't necessarily going to be able to afford the finest silks or the beautiful, luxurious, soft yarn that is going to be spun from the Kashmiri goats either. So Josephine, I think, is to blame in a lot of ways for that sort of luxurious, regal kind of imperial style. And also, I think it's fascinating to look at what was going on at the time as well. So, you have the British Empire basically at its pinnacle. You have Napoleon take his throne, 1804. The Greek War of Independence occurred 1821. And then you have the Italian unification happening 1848. So there's a lot happening in Europe at this time via trade routes, like you were just saying.
And was the this is kind of in your wheelhouse, but the Ottoman Empire was pushing, the Greeks and Armenians. I think that was in our article.
Sure, yeah.
They were pushing them, out and towards the west, and so they brought, a lot of.
And that's something too I want to bring up. I did a lot of this in my, a lot of research in my paper as well for my thesis. A lot of the Greek and Armenian artisans in Istanbul and throughout Europe were doing a lot of this sort of merchantry work with these shawls and, you know, artisan work. Yeah. So it's very fascinating to see who under the Ottoman Empire were creating these things. Yeah. And also I think the shawls were also transcending like these religious boundaries as well in the Ottoman Empire. Everyone wanted a shawl. Yeah. And, you know, it's sort of interesting to look at too, the influence of the Italian city-states in the Greek islands, because when you look at geography, for example, you have the west coast more influenced by Italians, and then you have the east coast, obviously you have a little bit more of that Ottoman kind of Byzantine style. Yeah. Even in the island of Chios, where my family's from, there are motifs on various gravestones that are actually Islamic Ottoman sort of floral motifs. So sort of interesting to
that's so
think
wild.
of motifs.
Because it is such a strategically placed, you know, spot in the world where you have, you know, both east and the west. That's a good kind of like meeting point there. So I don't know if you caught this. This is a wild fun fact. I don't want to call it a fun fact, but this sort of scarred me today. Oh no. Listening to the podcast episode of Dress, which I found completely fascinating. So obviously the Kashmiri goats were the star players in this entire system, and it was from the underbelly of the goats where this wool for the shawls were primarily made from originally. The OG Cashmere shawl, that's where they got the wool from, the underbelly, the softest wool. Yep. So we're not talking like, you know, like wool from like the Highlands. You know, we're talking about the Kashmiri goats. So in 1812, the British East India Company, which automatically I always think of Pirates of the Caribbean with the East India Trading Company. That's how I first learned about it.
Anyway, yes. So they inevitably decided to take some goats and bring them to England. One boat was for the male goats and the other boat was for the female goats. The female goat boat was lost at sea. The ship was lost at sea, so all of those goats perished. Oh no. Yes. And then the male goats made it to England. However, they could not adjust to the climate, so they all perished as well. So that's horrible, isn't it?
That's really sad.
And the environmental historian in me just wants to scream. Yes. Just wept. Yes. But you know, that again, for the commodities, well sought after happening, that was another tale of the British Empire.
Learning, if you don't know these things, learning can be really vivid sometimes, and you know, trial by fire, I guess. Like that's horrible. I feel really bad for the poor goats.
So something else I learned, which was wildly fascinating, by basically 1870, the long, luxurious shawl that is always pictured on Josephine, for example, and always sought after, was sort of inevitably fading because the bustle, the large sort of quintessential Victorian era bustle was coming into fashion, and that is basically, from what I learned from the podcast, that women wanted to show off more of the behind of a dress. So less of a long dramatic shawl, more of a short, maybe covering. So
interesting. Josephine had like up to 400 shawls, and she like a lot. Wild. She had a lot, and one I don't remember, it was in one of our sources, but there was a female Parisian writer. I'm probably gonna butcher her name. Madame de Remusat. I don't know. I'm not French, but she wrote somewhere that Napoleon never wanted to see Josephine wearing the same shawl twice. And if he did catch her wearing the same one, he would take it off of her and throw it in the fire and destroy it.
That is.
Oh my gosh! I was like, I don't know if that's true. If that's just like to exaggerate this, but if it is true, like that's horrible. That would stink. But so she had so many because he never wanted to see her wearing the same one twice.
All that time,
you know, that reminded me of like if we're thinking about modern day, like the influencers of the world of like Instagram and never like outfit repeating, which I hate that because we're thrifty. I growing up, I mean, I would wear the same thing over and over, like wear it to death, and my mom was like, you know, you have other clothes, like wear something else. But anyway, so that kind of reminded me of that kind of culture of today of like, don't like go out wearing the same outfit twice, you know. So it kind of reminded me of that. It's like people haven't changed that much in a few hundred years. But
and what was also so interesting, like that idea that one article is going to take so painstakingly long, and we apologize for the noise. We are across the street from a fire station, so if you hear any blaring alarms, that is it. Nothing we can do about it. Anyway. So what I also learned about the various countries of Europe during this time with trade and with production of textiles, the British were already set, ready to go with their wool production. Like, we're doing it already. The French, however, under Napoleon's rule as well, were sort of perfecting, or were well known for their self-proclamation of having the perfect Cashmere shawl. So not only did they rip it off, but now they have the perfect version of it. So it's sort of that appropriation almost of what the Cashmere shawl really was, in a French way.
Yeah, I think that so there's something in me that says like the original is always the best, you know. But I think there's something to be said about also like the climate and things, and so when you have shawls made of like silk in the Far East, and you know, and cashmere, you know, wool in the Near East, and then you have like that heavy gruff wool in like the Western hemisphere of the world. And I actually tried to do some more research on Northwestern Europe, particularly Scandinavia and over in Scotland, because it's just where my brain gravitates towards. And of course we did mention that we'll probably do, you know, a whole Outlander series of, you know, the shawls and what she wears there, but I wanted to kind of touch on that a little bit, because with the shawls over in you know, the British Isles and specifically in Scotland, you did find very like lace textured shawls, but you also had the shawls for utility, like people needed to be warm. Specifically up in Shetland. So talking about geography, very important. If you're looking at Scotland, the northernmost part of Scotland, the mainland, right above that is a little island called Orkney Island, and there's some more sirens going off. Right above Orkney you have Shetland, which is where the Shetland ponies come from. And then you have the North Sea, and then you have Norway. So talking about trade routes, like the whole North Sea and Shetland was really the hub for trade between like Denmark and Norway, with Scotland. And back in the Middle Ages, in around the 11th century, there was a whole North Sea empire. So that whole part of the world I kind of look as one kind of like mixture of cultures and things. Like up in Scotland, up far that north, you do see a lot of obviously Norse influences. So I was trying to find like a connection between like Scandinavian shawls and like the, you know, what the women wore there and the connection with Scotland, but I don't know if I looked hard enough, or I didn't really find many sources on that. But what I did find about Shetland was, you know, the women there, it's cold, you know, it's cold up there. So they wore that heavy wool, and it was, the shawls there were more of a rectangle shape. They weren't really triangular yet or circular. And they would wear them, like you were saying, from like back to front, and then they would cross it over in the front, and then they would tuck it in or tie it in the back so that their arms are and their hands are free, because these were working women who needed to have use of their hands, but they were covered in that shawl. And so for people in Shetland, like you did have those, like I said, those kind of lacy, more intricate shawls that you would wear at like weddings and things. They actually there was a little like trick that they did to prove that like how drapey and finely knit these lace shawls were, was they would kind of wrap it up and try and fit it through a wedding ring, on their wedding. Like they would kind of run the whole shawl through a wedding ring. And so I thought that was so interesting to kind of see just how finely intricate they were, and thinking about how those were made. But so I thought the whole history in Shetland was very fascinating, because when you think about you know, Scotland and cold weather stuff, like you go to Shetland and see just how because obviously over in say India, or you know, you don't really think of like sturdy, like, you know, really warm wool because, they needed that. So it's interesting to see how it's, you know, adapted in other places to accommodate the weather, you know, what they're doing over there.
I think too with like the motifs or even the materials too, especially at this time, I think it was very exoticized also to have those, you know, luxury goods.
Yeah.
But what was quite fascinating for me is looking also at the advertisements of this time, because of course we think 20th century advertisements, you know, you're going to see patterns like from the 1950s, which are very cool. You can still buy knitting patterns from the 1950s on Etsy, whatnot. But there was a really great resource in one of the articles we read, Giulia Ferrario, who was a publisher or writer at the time who had published a costume publication. And he discusses a little bit about the adornments that had gone onto these shawls. So various decorations or patterns. And so it says here, we have seen cashmere dresses adorned with 3 rows of tulips, large merino shawls with borders woven into large bunches of flowers, or long merino woolen scarves with high borders like the ones you can see in the illustration. And I'll try to find something that matches this description. Hopefully I can find something and link it, of course. And then that idea of the first magazine for women with these shawls advertised. So, you know, you might have like during this time of Josephine, for example, with Napoleon, you might have women who have like a personal shopper almost who bring these luxurious goods from the docks, as you were saying. Or you might, and this to me was blowing my mind, for the economical purposes of having this available to most people, you would have patterns for the shawls in the magazine. So if you were going to use a local material to create these shawls, you would have the pattern available to you.
So cool.
So yeah, that was really, really interesting to look at. And the sheer sensation of the shawl, I think, was part of that upper echelon of society where you're being watched. It's basically the symbol of pure luxury. So
yeah, that's really cool.
Print culture.
Yeah,
really cool.
Yeah, that's cool. You tend to, or at least I don't tend to think of like, you know, the advertising world back then. But yeah, it's so important. I feel like the image of the shawl was so important. Like you said, like what it represented. Going back to where they originated from, but shawls were originally meant for both men and women, which I thought was very interesting. And I wonder,
just like heels.
Yeah, just like heels. I'd love. That's very funny. The shawls were made for both men and women. And I think men did wear them in the West for a little bit. But do we know when like that kind of fell off? Did it fall off kind of quickly? I feel like it was always kind of advertised towards women only.
I would say so. So if we're looking at like 1870s, by like really when shawls were falling out of fashion, probably prior for sure. Like for the men. Yeah. I think also for the men, I think it was more that that idea of the luxury and the exotic,
the status symbol.
Yes.
And it's funny you mentioned the 1870s because how it kind of fell off. One of the things I found interesting was the Franco-Prussian War happening at the time. In France technically like lost that war, and so the makers of these shawls over in Kashmir were kind of like almost like waiting for like what's the outcome going to be, because you know with France losing, it's like you lose a war, you're obviously in a lot of debt, obviously you've gone through, you know, a traumatic experience of living through a war and whatnot, and with that, you know, Germany became more of what we know as Germany, and so France kind of I don't know how you'd call it, but you know, took a backseat a little bit after that loss, and so I think that played a big role, and also the decline of that luxury, you know, coming out of a war. It's just like World War II, you know, coming out of that, you've kind of got to reevaluate like what you think you need, and you know what you're gonna put your money and efforts into. So I think that war also had a big part in the decline of the shawls, and kind of not needing that status symbol, I guess, anymore. You know, I don't know, war changes things quite often.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the shawl is fascinating because I don't think it's going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
And I think also when you mention shawl to most people who aren't in the knitting community, they usually think like the Dowager Countess Violet from Downton Abbey, who's a very traditional kind of like steadfast woman.
Yeah.
And
which is something to be said about that.
Yes.
She's great.
So, yeah. I like a good shawl.
Yeah, I think shawls are great. I feel like I am very excited to make more of them and to wear, like I was talking about before, like to wear them out more. I think it would be really, really fun to bring them back.
I mean, listen, we don't have 3 years to make one, but
no,
they are an easy project.
Yeah. I feel like with the modern, techniques now, you can, but it's cool to know that like you can really put that much time and effort into an object, and that's why I think like the value of handmade things are so high, because you have obviously the age of machines have really, I think, downplayed the worth of like a good handmade handmade items. Quality of it,
the love.
The love and just the skill that it takes. It's really, really cool. So to look back and see where those shawls came from, and knowing that it took years to make them. Also, one random thing I read was in Cashmere, the dyeing process of like dyeing the yarn was a hereditary kind of position. Like you were kind of like, that's what you did. Your family, you were dyers of yarn for the shawls, which I found really interesting because you have this industry of shawls. You are like, you dedicate your life to it basically, and your family's lives to it. So that just goes to show that I think the real appreciation that I think people have, and had for them, you dedicate your life to it.
Right. Yeah. And it's like you were saying, that sort of hereditary aspect. It's like almost like the Medicis with banking. You just go into this sort of artisan craftsmanship. And I think I also found that a lot in the Ottoman Empire with these artisan families or merchant families. That sort of history is very interesting too. So yes, there was an Armenian weaver, and I want to look a little bit into this too. I tried to Google a little bit, but I think I'm gonna have to go into like some databases and whatnot. Elia D. Alessandri.
I remember him.
So during the early modern period too, the sheer richness of the Mediterranean is fascinating. You have these Italian merchants, you have the Greek and Armenian merchants. So all of this is being shared and sort of contributing to this making and the building of city-states as well, and culture. So he had a 20-year monopoly for the production of cotton cloth with gold and silver thread and natural flowers in the Indian style of Bastar and Surat. So I'm gonna try and link some things as well for that, but that's also the influence of the Italians in the Greek peninsula as well. So through the Ottoman Empire, such a rich history.
Super cool.
So I think that wraps up.
Does that cover everything we read about? I think so. It was a lot. It was a lot at some points, and then like I said before, there was more that like I wish I could find more about, which I feel like if anybody like knows of sources that are really interesting and they want to share it with us, I would love to read more about these, especially like in like Western Europe and even like the traditions in America. You've got America being a very new country at this time too, so like how they kind of were involved in all of this would be interesting too. So yeah, and any sort of sources that you guys have, share it with us. We'd love to read more about it. But yeah, I think this was really fun to kind of talk about the like material history of such a fascinating piece of clothing that really just took everybody. They were just so fascinated with this. So I think it's cool. To bring it back a little bit.
So anyway, next week we'll be off.
Yes.
Week after that we'll be here.
Yes. Do we want to talk a little bit about what we're going to do?
Yeah. Well, it's the holiday season, so we have to get a little festive.
Yes.
So we'll have, like, I think I mentioned it, and I have such a short-term memory. So in the intro, I mentioned that we have our giveaway. We're going to announce it during our episode 3, which will be sort of a Yuletide holiday extravaganza featuring Rachel and I.
Yes. I will be hopefully wearing a little Christmas themed cardigan that I've been working on. A little number. And we're going to talk about just really fun traditions throughout history on Christmas, different Yuletide traditions. I already have a couple in mind that like I'd love to dive deep into and just kind of have it be a very chill, you know, just talking about fun Christmas themes. Yeah, we're going to have a little fire. It'll be fun. And then after that, who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Maybe we'll just time travel.
Yes, if only. I would love to.
So, yes, and I'm going to a movie tomorrow night. It's a one night only feature in the U.S. Called Smyrna. So I will look forward also to giving my review.
Yes, I can't wait to hear about that
few weeks as well.
Yeah.
So
there's also one thing that I want to mention. As of right now, I think it's December 18th. I'll have another little table set up for my little business, Little Way Creations. There's going to be a little craft vendor fair. It's going to be local. It's at Lanza's nursery, Lanza's farm it's in Wall. It's going to be in one of the greenhouses. It's the yoga farm there. So my cousin teaches yoga there, and they're going to have a nice little vendor fair with a live band. And it's a great little way to support local crafters and vendors and small businesses, and I'm going to be there, so if you want to stop by,
please.
It'll be December 18th, and we'll link more info on that if people want to go. There's going to be really, really cool people there. Fun Christmas ideas if you have last minute shopping you need to do. So yeah, that's a little something coming up too, which I think will be fun.
Yeah, can't wait. And I mean, the New Year is upon us, which
yes,
we will have wonderful things coming to Hook and Needle history. I think this is just the beginning, people.
Just the beginning. Very, very exciting. So. I'm glad we were able to bring you episode 2. Hopefully you guys enjoyed.
Thank you guys.
Yay.
We did that.